What a week it has turned into in world news. Turkey is deporting Christians under the guise of national security. We've had setbacks in the Middle East, particularly in Gaza, after President Trump made that historic announcement of a ceasefire and peace between Gaza and Israel. Will it hold up? Here with more is Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. She is joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jeanette.
I want to get back to Trump in Egypt and the deal and what's going on in Turkey. But first of all, I understand there is some breaking news. It looks like President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are talking. It looked like Trump had been planning to speak with Putin, who is continuing to carry out strikes on Ukraine. And it sounded like this meeting of the two is one day before he meets with Zelensky. So he's contemplating handing over some high-precision Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine.
Yes, yeah. And it's interesting, Jeanette. I think if there's one thing after the Gaza ceasefire plan that is keeping Trump and his team up at night, obviously, it's figuring out an end to the Ukraine-Russia war. Meanwhile, he's dealing with two leaders that are only fixated on how to continue this war and how to escalate this war. So he's meeting with Zelensky tomorrow. We know what he's going to do. Zelensky is going to ask for more missiles, and in this case, Tomahawk. He's very much set on a very specific order of things he wants from Donald Trump. Donald Trump was before very much against escalating this war, giving Ukraine more resources, money, weapons, etc., to in fact de-escalate this war. But because Russia, Putin, is not responding to threats, to escalated sanctions, to deadlines coming from the White House, this phone call today is a precursor to say, listen, tomorrow I'm talking to Zelensky. You know what's on the table. I may be giving them more weapons, more deadly weapons. So why don't I give you a chance to have this conversation and hopefully try to bring him down a notch, in that conversation. So that's what we're hoping for. I think Trump is playing it out as best as possible in that sense, to use at least the timing of this to say, this is diplomacy. If you want diplomacy, this is diplomacy. If you want to play the hard way, then I will give those weapons to Zelensky in our call tomorrow. So I think he timed this in a way that it's coming off as a threat / diplomacy, which is the Trump way. And I think his White House actually has a good handle on this. Marco Rubio has come out many times saying we're not going to allow Putin to play out the clock. And that is why those deadlines have been moved up. Again, Putin not responding to any deadlines because he's the madman that he is, but the White House working again to find some sort of off-ramp for this very deadly and senseless war.
Lots to cover here today. Will Hamas keep their end of the bargain? Trump says he's going to make sure they do. Then we turn around and see Hamas publicly executing civilians in the streets of Gaza because they claimed these men have helped the IDF.
It's such a shame. Obviously, they're going to behave this way. We cannot expect a terror organization to reform itself or to be in power in any capacity. If you recall, the Trump plan for this entire ceasefire had 20 points. And the world is focused on the 20 living hostages returning to Israel, which was, and cannot be understated, it was a historic moment. A moment of victory for Israelis who had gone through 2 years of this war with thousands killed on October 7th, 2023, and losing thousands more in this war, and obviously thousands of Palestinians killed, many being innocent and many more being Hamas operatives. So this was not an easy war, an easy one to talk about as we have over the last 2 years, Jeanette. But that being said, one of the more important points of that 20-point plan was the disarming and dismantling of Hamas. We have not seen any indication that that will happen. So when Trump got back to the White House, he did say over the podium one more time that Hamas must dismantle and disarm, or they'll have to face the violent consequences of force dismantling and force disarmament. And I think that's a very important thing because this war and this ceasefire is not going to be in full effect until we do see that. The other part of this is not just the returning of 20 living hostages, but the remains of those 28 8 deceased hostages who were killed in Hamas captivity that have not been returned. Some have, and I believe 19 remain in Hamas possession. And imagine the families there who feel like the world is moving on and not paying attention to this part of the deal so that they can get proper burial, so that they can get the remains of their loved ones. And Hamas is playing tricks and saying they don't know where these bodies are, even though they agreed to return them. So will it hold? Who knows? This is a trust but verify type of deal. And can you really trust a terror organization? Obviously, we know the answer to that. There are many, many factors here at play. And until there is this deadly ideology that is being passed down to the next generation, until Hamas, a deadly terror group, is in power, and there are those like Iran's regime that will continue to fund a deadly terror organization like Hamas, we have nothing to trust here. So moving forward, obviously there was good news this week, and we don't want to take away from that. And again, I don't want to understate how important that moment was. If you watch the footage coming out of Israel, how a nation is so resilient that they can move on and say, we're going to celebrate today, and we can compartmentalize, and we can still be sad, and we can still be concerned about the future of the region. But today we will celebrate the return of 20 of our own.
Yeah, and I believe the remains of the last female Hamas hostage have been handed over to Israel. And her name was Enbar Heyman. She was an IDF soldier and was killed at the Nova Festival during the October 7th attack. And Lisa, for her family, this, of course, is both relief and heartbreaking at the same time. And it looks almost like the U.S. is going to be overseeing, the U.S. military oversee the next phase of that peace plan. But who knows where that's going to go, because I don't think any decisions have been made on who will actually supply those troops in Gaza, right?
Right. And, Trump made this very historic trip to Israel and then to Egypt to sit down for this summit. So what Trump was very, very successful at doing is bringing in these moderate Arab states to say, first of all, we want to all move forward together. And we know that he is very good at selling this vision of prosperity and stability for the future of the region. We saw him do it in his first term under the Abraham Accords, and that was very much successful. We saw private and public deals. We saw tourism exploding in the region, and really just a glimpse of what can be if radicalism and these ideologies are put aside. And those moderate Arab states are very much willing and wanting to do that. Now, obviously, October 7th derailed that momentum, and so did the Biden administration, because we had a blip. Now we have Trump 2, the second term of the Trump administration, that is going back to this vision. And it didn't take long before Trump sat down with many of these Arab leaders and said, you know what, this is our idea for the Palestinian issue. If you have other ideas, please bring them on, but you need to take responsibility. And we saw that in the last 2 years, the Arab states didn't really step up. They paid a lot of lip service to say, this is what we want to support, for example, a two-state solution. We saw Saudi Arabia and a lot of the European states say that. But what does that look like? What does one aspect of that look like? And no one can really map that out. So to your point, Jeanette, do we know what this interim will look like for Gaza? I think it's going to be nailed out as we move along, and we see what Hamas is going to do. Will there be another phase of this war to actually dismantle and disarm Hamas? That is the most important part of all of this. And then the second part of that becomes, who then will lead the Palestinian people? And I think that was where we want to see, and Trump again bringing the Arab states in to say, help us out here. We all have to move forward together. UN is helpless. These NGOs are helpless. They've got a ton of money and they didn't do anything for the Palestinian people. If anything, they were part of the terror that unfolded on October 7th and afterwards. So lots to keep track of here, and of course we will keep our gazes on the region, because there will be more news coming out. This is not exactly the final peace announcement, as much as Trump is very much eager to say that it is. It's not. But again, the fact that he was able to bring these nations together, the fact that he has a vision to move forward, and the fact that he got those 20 hostages back, again, I cannot understate how important that was. We've gotten the ball rolling. We've got some semblance of a ceasefire, and hopefully we can build upon that moving forward.
I want to get to Turkey here, because there's a couple of interesting things happening. So when Trump was in Egypt making his speech, he praised Turkish President Erdogan, who he credits for helping deliver the ceasefire in Gaza. And some now are raising concerns over Turkey's ambitions regarding Gaza. Meanwhile, it's being reported that Turkey has now deported peaceful Christians, stating national security as the reason. So do you think that is there a correlation here? Or is this just an attack on freedom of religion?
Well, Erdogan is a very complicated character in the region. They all are, absolutely. But I think what Turkey and Qatar, by the same token, and in this case, Egypt, the three of them I'll put in the same row. But I want to speak about Turkey separately. For years, we have called Turkey the frenemy of the United States because they choose when they want to be Western, where they want to be an ally, where they want to be part of NATO, where they want to be part of the Western world order, modern and progressive. Then they choose when they want to support terrorism, insert themselves in Syria, kill the Kurds, which are our partners on the ground, by the way. Get involved in Gaza. Obviously, they were incredibly contentious against the Israelis in that war as well. It's interesting. And I think what Trump did in Egypt was to deliver the compliments up front, hoping to get some sort of results down the road. It doesn't mean that he's taking his eyes off of Erdogan or Iran's regime or Egypt or Qatar. We hope. But these are the East-West moderate, and I say that in air quotes because are they truly moderate? You look at a character like Qatar, and they are housing the Hamas operatives, they are supporting Hamas, and then they become the mediators in that same conflict. So it's complicated. You can't do that, right? And we need to call them out on it. But at the same time, Trump did utilize these three countries in getting the ceasefire. They were brokers, they were involved, but again, trust and verify. We need to sit down and figure out where we draw the line and where we draw the ultimatums here and say, but you can't do that. You cannot be doing this to Christians. You look at Syria, someone else that Donald Trump is trusting a bit blindly, and say you can't kill the Druze. You cannot continue with this terrorism against minorities. In an effort to create the next caliphate right under our noses as we're paying you compliments from the White House. It just doesn't work that way. So I think that I don't think that Donald Trump's team is blind to these things. Marco Rubio, for example, his Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth, Department of War, department formerly known as the Department of Defense. They know a lot. They are very much keyed into the nuances here. They know these players well. They know what they're up to. But again, we have to see to what extent we're using them and playing along with them in terms of regional diplomacy, and to what extent they will be working against us and our interests with regards to their radicalism or the ideology moving forward. So I think this is the way you play the game. This is foreign policy. Every nation has its own interests, but we have to make sure that the West and the United States are defended on the global stage.
Lisa Daftari, Editor-in-Chief of the Foreign Desk, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.